Hello, everyone, and welcome to issue number 87 of Anti-Life Reviews. I am the Tony Makaya, your patriot for this most American of months. We continue to look at one of my favorite superheroes of all time, Captain America. After the insanity of the Mad Bomb fiasco, moved to a less frantic but no less exciting story. It took place in Captain America issues 253 and 254, were published from January to February in 1981, with the story Blood on the Moors. So click that subscribe button, go ahead, do it for Cap, and let's get right into it. Writers and artists on this now, these two people are sharing duties on both writing and art, are Roger Stern. He helped create my favorite Spider-Man villain, the Hobgoblin, but on top of that had runs on Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, the Hulk, Action Comics, did a very fun Darkman vs. Army of Darkness comic, which maybe I'll talk about sometime, and John Bryan. I've talked about John before, mostly for his work on X-Men, where he helped create characters like Kitty Pryde, Emma Frost, Sabretooth, Bishop, Omega Red, and everyone's favorite superhero team from the North, Alpha Flight. So yeah, an important person in the annals of X-Men history. Moving to the store, we open on jolly old England, which isn't so jolly because there's a seeming serial killer on the loose that has been leaving bodies in a horrid state and lacking blood. The inspectors inform Jacqueline Falsworth, who was the original Spitfire in World War II, and her invalid father, James Falsworth, who had been Union Jack in World War I, about this new death, and James decides there's only one man who can help. We move to New York City, and one Steve Rogers, Captain America, who is in the midst of stopping an armed robbery. That night, Steve has a date with girlfriend Bernadette Rosenthal to see Oklahoma, and after that's all over, they relax, hoping for a quiet night together. But that's a no, as Jarvis, the Avengers butler, calls and tells Cap essentially to get his ass to England. On the plane ride over, he thinks about being in England with the invaders in World War II. Some of those members include Spitfire and Union Jack, Jacqueline and her father, respectively, as I mentioned before. Of course, that's who he's head over to see, and they trade stories of what their lives had been for numerous years. But amidst this, James insists Baron Blood, an old Avengers foe, is back. Cap meets a local doctor named by the name of Cromwell, and he was on scene for several of the investigations. Cap asks about vampires. The doctor is quite irate. We find out there had been a vampire scare some years ago, with the doctor's house being a victim of this and being burnt down. His daughter being killed and him being burnt quite severely. The next step is the grave of Baron Blood. Since he was officially a lord, he was buried under heavy guard with garlic and crosses in the Tower of London. But it's a pretty brief visit as Cap and then the doctor deduce it's not the body of Baron Blood, but a 20-year-old woman who had been there for over a decade. So the good Baron has been free to do what he wants for some time. And what he wants is Captain America. After meeting Ken, Jacqueline's son, and his friend Joey, and discussing the return of the Baron with James, Steve is attacked, but Cap is ready for him. A fight ensues, and Baron is able to get the best of Cap, wanting to bite his handsome, muscular neck. But of course, getting to that well-defined neck is harder than you might think, as the Baron hurts his teeth on the chainmail between the layers of Cap's suit. Cap takes it to the Baron again, but when Ken tries to get involved, he only makes up a victim. So Cap has to save him, and the Baron realizes the sun is coming up, so turns into a bat and escapes. Cap briefly lashes out at Joey, Ken's friend, and about being a vampire, but when the hot-tempered Englishman tries to test Cap, Steve knows he's not the Baron. We then learn the history of Baron Blood. He is John Falsworth, Union Jack's brother, who was blinded by ambition and greed, became a vampire, then a Nazi, like you do. And what they thought was their final battle with the Baron is the reason James is in a wheelchair now, all those years ago. We then find the local doctor is actually the Baron in disguise, the scars covering his real vampire-ness. Cap rallies the troops and they search the town, but no sight of the Baron. They do find a local girl who has been bitten. James decides he wants to be useful, the way he used to be. He's sour, he is so feeble, and he dons his old Union Jack costume, though he is sickly, so the doctor is called for. And the Baron reveals himself to James when they are alone, that the real Dr. Cromwell was a thrall of Dracula, and he released the Baron. Obviously, that ended in the doctor's death. But when Blood goes in for attack, it's not James at all. It's Joey in a Union Jack costume. Him and Cap beat back the Baron into the sunlight. Then Steve, after a tense moment, severs the Baron's head with his shield. They burn the body of the Baron at night, and during the ceremony, Sir James Falsworth passes on as well. His final deeds done, and the mantle of Union Jack having been passed on. To end the story. Alright, well, I want to talk about one person, and that's Captain America. As in these two issues, we get an absolute ton of characterization about Steve. A lot more than I would have anticipated for 2 issues. We get to see his man out of time thing on full display here, especially his relationship starting with Bernadette. He wants to go see Oklahoma, a Roger Hammerstein's play that debuted on stage in 1943, which is exactly when Cap said he first saw it. He also mentions he loves big band music compared to modern rock, though we get no examples. He says one of his favorite films is To Have and Have Not, a Humphrey Bogart vehicle from 1944. And I just like these little touches, the way he still likes things from his 20s, not the 20s, his 20s. And when he sees Jacqueline and James, just the way they act about having aged so much, and he still remains the same captain that they remember from the war. As well as Invader stuff, which I want to talk about a little bit later. But it was nice to see Cap as this kind of outsider no matter what. I would have liked to see it played up a little more as Captain America in England. That didn't really go anywhere. The death of Baron Blood was excellently done. Death is not a thing to be taken lightly, even if you're doing it to an evil vampire. We have Joey there, the new Union Jack, trying to be tough, standing tall. We have Cap, who doesn't want to be a killer, especially in such a gruesome way as severing the person's head with his shield. We see this hesitation, this disgust that he has to do it, the ultimate shock on Joey's face. We don't see the death, just a silhouette, and it's this subtlety that I really like. Cap is a soldier, but death is still something that weighs on his soul. The same sort of enthusiasm I felt for Cap's character work here can't really be extended to anyone else, sans two, sadly. Bernadette comes off as a little petty, if not in her rights, to feel like Steve is kind of a cold boyfriend. He doesn't really let her into his life, and she makes snarky remarks that kind of goes nowhere. Jacqueline, Ken, and Joey, there should have been something there, but beyond Jacqueline thinking of how old she is and she can't be Spitfire anymore, she's essentially useless. It's teased Ken, her son, will be the next Union Jack. Then it's kind of randomly Joey, even after he got punked by Cap earlier in the story, and is treated with little to no weight that he becomes that character. In fact, the story ends very shortly after. They were not presented poorly, they just didn't get much to do for the most part. As far as the two that were interesting, it's the brothers themselves, John Falsworth and James Falsworth, Baron Blood and Union Jack. And even after they were not entirely that compelling, we still got something with them, with James, his longing to be the man he used to be, especially in the face of Captain America, his virtual icon, unchanged in time. That was nice. And the switcheroo of him putting on the costume, but it's actually Joey, well, it was funny, if not incredibly silly, because one is an enfeebled old man and one is a young, muscular man. But whatever. I let it go because it was a nice twist. He then dies kind of unceremoniously. It's a little anticlimactic, but it wraps everything up. Now, the Baron, he was a giant fake head for most of it, which I loved that. I liked that he was the Doctor. It's almost stupid, but it was a fun reveal. He is a bad guy. His first fight with Captain America is like a Sato Inoki on the island length, as he attacks him at night, but it's day when it's done. But beyond that, honestly, I want to quote Draco from What We Do in the Shadows movie from 2014. I was a Nazi vampire after the war, which the Nazis lost, which I don't know if you know the Nazis lost that war. If you were a Nazi after the war, no. If you were a vampire, no. If you were a Nazi vampire, no way. That's all I really have to say about the Baron. He did reveal that Cap uses chainmail between his costume, which I really like that as a thing. I don't know if it comes up that much after. I want to go over a few other things that, briefly before wrapping up. Cap is poor in this. He talks about using his savings to fly to England, and his job as a freelance artist isn't paying much. He's an Avenger. He doesn't get paid. It's very strange as a subplot. It doesn't really go anywhere, but it's interesting that Captain America, not Spider-Man, who's notoriously poor. Tony, what are you doing? The Avengers have a UN contract. Pay this man. I'm sure you owe him some military money for all the years he was technically alive but frozen. A guy near the beginning says, I've heard about Captain America most of my life, but I never actually thought he was real, which is strange. He's been on TV a number of times. I guess he's sort of a figure you hear about, but you don't know if you really believe him until you see him in person. He also thinks of the Invaders as a World War II group. Now that had him, Bucky, Human Torch, the original Human Torch, Toro, Union Jack, Namor, and Spitfire. But that's not the funny part. They go over to their enemies, Masterman, the Blue Bullet, Agent Access, Warrior Woman, the Scarlet, the Face, and Asbestos Lady. The Face and Asbestos Lady. I bet you I know what happened to Asbestos Lady. She probably didn't make it. Overall, this was an incredibly fun story that had a lot more going on, especially with Cap, than I would have imagined. I'd never read this before, and it was on a list of best Cap stories, high up too. I'm certainly glad I read this, and yeah, I would absolutely recommend this to anyone. It's a fun Captain America story, an interesting vampire jaunt. Well, that was week 2 of Captain America month with Blood on the Moors. Would you like to see Cap go around the world dealing with monsters from those regions? What regions of monsters do you think would be compelling for Cap to fight? Let me know down below. So check out my revamped Patreon, where you can support me for as little as $1. Add my Instagram under Demon Peaks for daily Twin Peaks memes. Check my podcast, Dark Peaks Podcast. And be here next week as we continue with the red, white, and blue as we look at Operation Rebirth. This has been the Tony Micaiah, Master of Minds and of Men. Thank you very much, and goodbye.